Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host. It's been a while, isn't it? So I was joined by the rather wonderful, rather fantastic Lewis Shaw from Braincrack Games, just for a catch-up chat, because we've been meaning to talk for a while. So we cover a lot of different topics, but I just hope you enjoy the chat. And now, on with the show. This is like one of those situations where, kind of like, you know how there used to be like a sense of urgency to everything, and there still is a sense of urgency. But I think people,
I feel like it's only gotten worse.
I think people are doing a difference between kind of like looking at the big stuff and just going, "Oh, how important is that in my life?" And then on the other side of it, they're looking at stuff and they're just going, I need to get that done yesterday. Or they're looking at other things and going, I can let that slide. It was like, I'll give you an example. When I got my car MOT'd, and I got it done back in March, because I thought, well, I better get it done, just in case, because otherwise there's going to be a rush. And the garage were like, oh, you've got to take care of that right-hand tyre. Now, previous me would have thrown money at the guy and said, just fix it. But pandemic me was just like, you know, I've done about the most mileage I've done was actually driving out to get this MOT done today. So I think we're good.
Yeah, what's the odd tyre that just, yeah.
What's the odd tyre between friends? How are you anyway? How's you and how's the family? Because it's been...
Oh, it's good. It is turning into one, isn't it?
It's been...
That's the thing, it keeps catching me off guard.
It's been a while. I mean, I was looking at the Skype chat, and it was literally over 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's long enough that my Skype has just completely forgotten how long it was. It's like, who is this R. Simpson fellow?
It's just a date. It's just kind of like a date in the past kind of thing, which is kind of like fun, which is kind of like fun, because things have changed quite a lot for you. Because let's talk. I mean, we will go. I mean, we will talk obviously about other things, but you've had a kind of few kind of personal things kind of happen.
Yeah.
This has been an eventful couple of years for you, isn't it?
And more so than I've even really talked about much. Like it's been a big year for me, not just because Rowan was born, and but also getting like properly diagnosed with ADHD for the first time, which I knew for what seemed like forever. Like it was always just a fact. And people would just meet me and be like, "Oh, you have ADHD. Okay, I know your deal." But it was the kind of realization that I was like, "Oh, I actually have like responsibilities now. I should probably get my shit together." Yeah. And then doing that and then getting medicated seemingly just like touched everything, and I don't want to say like fixed everything, but has definitely made a big improvement.
Do you find that because you've always had a bit of a drive behind you to get stuff done, and that's kind of shown in, I guess, the growth that you've kind of seen, but have you always had the drive, but then you've kind of like went, oh, I forgot to put kind of socks on today, or I forgot to put a wash on, or the dishes.
Oh yeah, like the drive was always there, but it was just for whatever was interesting in the minute.
Yeah.
And it was only through the efforts of others that meant that it kind of sustainably turned into a company. when I started, when the thing of the minute was like, I want to make a board game, and it just kind of, I don't want to say like accidentally turned into a business, but it kind of did. And then I did the same thing again this year, a separate business where I was just like talking about it enough that it became a thing. And it's a terrible habit to just talk things into becoming a reality, but it's one that I have.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of people that they do an awful lot of talk, and then the next thing, but they just talk some more about it. And
yeah, but I mean that's a totally respectful way to go about your life, isn't it? Like to have little fantasies and to be, quote unquote professional. One thing I do notice is the amount of people who just kind of like will self-describe as like an entrepreneur, as people who are just like, oh yeah, there's no kind of other word for it than I just make things happen. And personally, I don't really like the word, but it is kind of, I suppose, applicable to me. Well, I mean, it is applicable to me, whether I like it or not. Like just the tendency to just make things happen. But then the measure of it isn't, how many companies you start or whatever. It's just how well you actually follow through on that and take that on in your life as like a going concern.
Have you found it easier now that you're doing the medication stuff for ADHD to actually not focus on the now, but focus more on kind of like what's going to happen, the actual plan and the path? Because I know, because my issue is that I will quite happily sit there if I'm focused on something else, and I would have a flood of water wash over me, and only because what I'm dealing with just now has all of a sudden become exceptionally important to me that I can't move away, even if it means something that's going to kind of absolutely mess up my world. I will quite happily sit there until somebody comes along and says, are you not meant to be moving out of the way this large deluge of water that's kind of coming your way? But at the moment, I'm really focused on, this side of things, so I don't care. And that's what I've always, personally, I've always kind of struggled with it. And also, it's really funny, but I don't know, in terms of organising stuff, I really kind of rely on lists. And I don't mean kind of list software. I don't mean like Trello, Task Manager and stuff like that. I've physically got to have a piece of paper with the 5 or 10 things I need to concentrate on. Because I know that if I've got them in Trello, or if I've got them in Keeper or whatever I'm using, I can close that tab. And I can just completely ignore it. But if it's
it's so easy to use those, to like have those things, but then not to actually like regularly use them.
Yeah, I am. It
almost becomes a to-do list thing to like just look at my to-do list and have a sort through that, have a sift through that. Because I just became like a hoarder. I was like, right, I'm getting organized.
Yeah,
I'm like, write everything I need to do.
Yeah.
And of course, and because I'd never really made a plan before, like in my life. I was like, right, okay, this is what planning looks like. I just like put a date on everything, and everything is super urgent because I was just like really in the mindset of just like, all right, I've like fucked everything up for years. Now I'm getting my shit in order, and I need to do it pretty quickly to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
But then over the like last couple of months, I kind of realized like, okay, it's all right to actually have priorities and to let some things, because it's not like I still think of it as like, oh, I'm letting that slip, but it's not. It's like, I'm making that a lower priority, and it still feels awful.
And there's absolutely no point in, as like you said, there's absolutely no point in me marking anything as urgent, because all that happens is if I say, right, I'm going to put a tick on this to mark it as urgent, the next thing I'll do is I'll put a double tick on the next thing, and before I know it, I've literally got a list of stuff that is just like a line of ticks where and everything then is urgent. And what I've had to do is I've had to almost teach myself this, like, well, I'll tell you what, rather than do urgency in your brain, order it kind of any other way. Do you know what I mean? Order it alphabetically and then just do it, or order it by a certain date but then just do it. And I think the biggest thing is actually just getting on and saying, well, what's the least exciting thing I could do? Well, let's just get it out of the way, and almost treating myself. It's a kind of a strange thing, but that's, I have a piece of paper and a pen, and it just works.
Yeah, I find I tend to just I have like we now try and have like kind of like one document that like everyone's looking at, and it's got, you know, the plan in inverted commas, and it's the kind of, it's where we like work things out week by week and say, okay, what is actually going on. And then I've kind of fallen away from like all the like, you know, apps and stuff, just in favor of like a kind of dieted like to-do list each morning, and just like sit there and write, okay, like what actually needs to happen right now, and like refer to those things, but then just like give myself a really slimline tonic version of it so that I can actually digest it and not just get completely freaked out, which is what would happen otherwise if I just like looked at the actual list of things to do, or things that Kickstarter backers or whoever are asking me to do, because it just becomes a kind of mess otherwise.
What pushed you to, I mean, you mentioned obviously Rowan turning up. Was it when you got kind of married? Was it after that event? Was it the birth of Rowan coming along? Did that make you decide, I really need to kind of sort everything out? Was there a defining moment where you went, all right, this is what it's like to be an adult? I can't.
Yeah, it was kind of like it was just kind of that dawning realization of like, oh, I'm going to have a small adult, and you can't retcon a child in the same way that you can, you know, like you know, a project, or, you know, some relationships or whatever. Like, you know, there are a certain amount of things you can just kind of like let them slide.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I was like, I'm not going to let a human child be one of those things.
Yeah.
But it was only once I kind of started that process of like diagnosis and like actually talking to someone, and because you obviously you can't just like turn up to the doctors and be like, all right, I have an ADHD, can you please give me a pill for it?
Yeah.
Like it's a whole, I think that whole process took like, I want to say like 6 months to kind of get to talk to someone, and then to go through everything, and you do a lot of questionnaires, and it's just like a process of realizing like, oh, this has actually had much more of an impact on my life than I thought it did. And that's mildly depressing if you let it be depressing, you know, like that can really, you can feel a lot of guilt with that.
Yeah, but also on the other side of it, as long as you have done it, I think at any point in your life, as long as you are able to look at something like a diagnosis like that and then say, well, at least I have done something about it, and at least, you know, moving forward, I know how to continue to do something about it. I think that's still a very, very good thing, you know, as time goes on, and I know relatives and people get older, you can see people being so stuck in their ways, and you wonder, you actually start to, as you self get older and you realise how the world works, you're a little bit like, I wonder what kind of a different person you would be if maybe there'd been some additional support, or if you take a certain action at kind of like a certain time. But that's great. I mean, with regards to the diagnosis, in terms of the business, in terms of Braincrack itself, did you sit down with Emily and think, should we be doing something else? I mean, where were you with the business when Rowan came along? Was everything kind of steady? Because you were on the lines to kind of like, you've been doing pretty decent. I mean, you'd moved up from kind of like the likes of Mind Out, and then you were bringing things like, you know, you was Farsight, and then recently, obviously, things have really kind of taken off with both kind of Ragusa and then kind of Venice. But again, at that point, did you say, did you examine where you were as a business and say, right, I really, you know, do I need to step back a bit and treat this as a kind of like as a hobby, or were you like saying, well, we need to go 100% on this to kind of make it really, really
go
well?
Well, I mean, I had, I think like about like 2 years now, decided to like leave the job I had been in for 2 years and then move on to like a new place. And it was a step up, and it was like a more kind of like, I was like editing a magazine and I thought, okay, yeah, I'm ready for that like step up in responsibilities, and it maybe gives me a bit more like flexibility to like work with Braincrack. And then I kind of got there, and to put it lightly, they weren't super impressed with how I was managing myself, being that I was essentially still like a very like kind of like scatty, distracted person who had just convinced myself that I was qualified for this thing, and I mean technically was qualified, but it then hit the runway, and we all realized like, okay, maybe this wasn't really meant to be. And then when I kind of left that, and I was like doing like a bit like soul searching, I was like, what do I do now? And Emily just like said like, we'll just do the business, do Braincrack, do this full time, because we'd been doing it for a couple of years by that point, and it got to a point where we had been doing it as a hobby for so long that we forgot that, oh yeah, there is actually the potential to take this full time. And so I kind of took the leap of faith and started doing it full time. And that was another one of the things that we realized that like a couple of months in, like, oh, if I'm actually at home completely beholden to myself, like managing my own time, like I need to actually like have a have a look at the things that are affecting that. So yeah, that was another big. It was that and Rowan that was like the okay, time to attempt to do some impression of adulting.
But things seem to be, I mean, kind of going well. I mean, I always view kind of the kind of this space either in two ways. What happens is you get like a designer who continues to kind of release product, and everybody just laps up that product again and again and again with a particular designer. And then, or you get to a point and you go, actually, I need to reach out and bring kind of other people in to the organisation and use the skills and the experience that I have. And I kind of put you guys in the same kind of wheelhouse as Alleycat Games, in that, and at the beginning, I think you guys were kind of round about the same thing. I mean, Cesar brought out his own designs. You had your own kind of designs as well.
Yeah.
And then you've both kind of gone to the lines of kind of like bringing in designers from other places. You've almost invited pitches to kind of come in. Was that a conscious decision to do that?
Yeah. It was essentially like we kind of realized like we enjoy elements of like the publishing and because at that point it was still like a part-time thing. We quickly kind of realized like, oh, if this is ever going to become something else, it's not really possible for us to just come up with our own ideas, and put out enough games to actually like make it worthwhile. And a lot is I think a lot of people see like some like designed games on Kickstarter, and they think, oh, that's just a cash cow. They just made a game and they put some art and they put it on it and then they just pumped it out there, and it's like it is so much harder than that. Then that makes out, I know that's like exaggerating, but there are so many extra steps beforehand, even just to come up with like the initial concept of like a game that people want to actually play. So that was when we started like talking to all the other designers, and it was really infectious, kind of bringing someone onto a project and them having loads of all the enthusiasm for their project, and yeah, we just kind of got caught up in it really and said, yeah, okay, let's do this one and then this one and then this one, and it's like you can easily get really like a kind of kleptomania about like signing games, because everyone pitches you their game and like, this is the most amazing thing in the world.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
like, yes, okay, I want to believe.
Yeah.
And then over the kind of years, we've like managed to almost like gain a bit more control over that process, and thinking like, okay, it's gone from like, what kind of games do designers want to pitch us, as like existing as a company that has no established boundaries. We've always been like, yeah. If it's something we want to play, then we'll publish it. It doesn't matter if it's not the same genre.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I see that. I mean, I see that if you just look at the stuff that you've done. I mean, in the same breath, you've got like Farsight, and then after that, you've got Dead and Breakfast. You know, two completely different things, and it's almost like I would have the kind of the Venn diagram of people who'd be into Dead and Breakfast and people who were in Farsight to be very, very, very almost apart.
Yeah, and it is crazy how much you can kind of like feel the difference, if that makes sense, when you like publish different kinds of games and you know, pitch them to different people, and the way people respond is it's just crazy. Like the way people engage with board games is like it's such a huge spectrum, and when you're on like the parts of the internet that are like hobby board gamers or like people that back a lot of Kickstarters, you can kind of lose sight of that because they're the kind of, I'm not saying like vocal minority because obviously I don't actually know the numbers, but it's so easy to like get away from what people actually want, and what people tell you that they want. So, and like it's so funny that like the amount of let's say very enthusiastic feedback that we got from like Farsight and people who are involved in the campaign, even before we launched it, like kind of having an opinion just on the way that we described the game, through to something like Dead and Breakfast, which didn't like take a huge amount of money on Kickstarter and no one was really talking about it, but that's like the one game that when I go to a convention or if I'm like wearing a branded t-shirt somewhere, someone will come up and be like, oh yeah, I played Dead and Breakfast and I really like it, and like it's really popular with our family. Yeah. But they're not like those aren't the kind of players that are like, you know, sitting on forums and giving you their opinion 24 hours a day. Like it's so we kind of got the benefit of like feeling out the different audiences, and this isn't to say that like there are any people that I don't want to sell board games to, but like figuring out what kind of a community we can have and that we want to have, and that kind of suits us, which I think is partly the reason that, you know, our focus for the last couple of years has been Euro games, because it's like a really lovely crowd who seem to just kind of get it, you know, they know what they want, and we know what they want, and it's been nice kind of having those people come back and chat to us about things.
When you're because I mean, let's talk about this kind of Ragusa and then Venice. Did that, when you were getting kind of like the feedback for Ragusa, was it just natural that kind of Venice was like, well, this is easy, let's just get Venice on here, let's just do it, because it made an awful lot of sense, as you said, the crowd of people that were brought in, the kind of, because I don't think, and I'll be honest, I don't think anybody intends to give nasty feedback. I think they always come in with the best of intentions, and the road to hell kind of
we've
thing.
not had many people who are like just straight up mean.
Yeah.
But there is like a in certain parts of the internet just this kind of like mentality that like we have this way of talking to the developers and the publishers, so we should do it to kind of tell them how to do their jobs. which is like on the one hand is like really useful, and we've had like I really like value that feedback, because we've had like expansions and the way that we do our Kickstarters have changed because of people's feedback and them just telling us, like, you know, put it plainly, I'd rather it were this way around, and we were like, okay, yeah, we'll do it that way then. And it's like I never want to like lose that kind of like feedback, because that's why we're on Kickstarter in the first place, right? Because it's like getting people who actually want to support it and have a say in how it comes out. Yeah. But yeah, it's I think while everyone comes at it with like a constructive like feeling, to be on the receiving end of that, especially like during a campaign when you're getting so much of it, it can just feel like so personal, because you're getting it as like a message on your phone, like you would like a text from a friend or something, but it's like 50 strangers telling you that the same thing is wrong and needs to be fixed, and it's like that's one of the hardest things about having it go from like a hobby, well, it's still being a family business that you run out of our like house. Like it's kind of everything just hits that bit harder, feels that bit more real.
Yeah, I think it's all the difference. I meet a lot of people who are in the manufacturing side, because I work with businesses that sell online and sell primarily into Amazon, and the number of people that I speak to who are just like, look, I make the product. You can put me in a room in front of Waitrose, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda's, whoever, and I will pitch that product and I will guarantee they will take 4,000 units off me, no problem at all. Do not ever put me in a situation where I'm having to deal with the end punter. Because my patience,
it's a completely different ballgame.
My patience completely evaporates. I says, I'm here to make widgets. I'm not here to deal with customer service issues. And I see it again and again. So I know that there's some people that logistically minded when it comes to stuff. They're just absolutely brilliant with it. But the reason they're so brilliant with it is because there's almost this wall. There's a disparity between them actually needing to deal with the end crowd. And I think if you're using like any kind of crowdfunding kind of platform, you end up at that dealing with the end consumer kind of thing, as opposed to if I was, turning up to you at UK Games Expo and saying, look, here's my game. I could give it to you, you would sign it, you would get it all sorted out, and all I would end up probably having to deal with is jumping on a couple of podcasts to talk about it and maybe dealing with a couple of, questions now and again. I wouldn't necessarily need to deal with kind of answering all the kind of the backers' problems. That's now your problem. It's not kind of mine. With you, and like everybody else, being at home, have you managed to get any games at all to the table? Is the thought of playing, because I know, I think one of the reasons, and I've mentioned this before, one of the reasons I kind of put a slow down on even doing the podcast was because people were kind of still in a bit of shock that one of the main things, that the reason that they talk about board games was it was 60% talk about board games, it was 40% talking about how I wrecked my garage at the weekend kind of thing. There was a social aspect. So have you... And I think a lot of people are looking at the hobby kind of going, I'd really love to still get that social feeling. How do I kind of do that? Have you managed to kind of play any games over the piece? And are you getting more time to play it? Have you been playing anything in particular recently that's kind of taken your fancy? Yeah,
I mean, it was, I think, having to, and because obviously after Rome was born, Emily was on maternity leave, and so we were both just spending more time together. And it was, I like, we've been playing more board games than we have ever been, really, because it was a realization that it's so hard to find that escape and still be sociable.
Yeah.
When you're like either running a business or you're doing parenting, and then because like usually like a lot of our hobbies before were like we would be at work all day and then we'd come home and then we just want a bit of like space to ourselves. So we'd like let's do like a podcast or do like painting or whatever. But then we realized that we were like, we're home all the time and we want to still enjoy each other's company, but like because we can't go out to the cinema or whatever wherever it was before that we did. So it was almost like quite like this like sense of urgency of like, we've got to like play some games now. Like we got to do that. Like get them, and it meant that we having that like stated intention it got us talking more about what kind of games that we like to play as a couple, and kind of reconnecting with like what it was that got us in when we started, because we didn't really have like a kind of conventional introduction to board games either, because we were just like going on Google and buying willy-nilly like what we like the look of. So we ended up, one day I buy Carcassonne and Emily would be like, what the fuck is this? It looks so dull and it's just fields and farms. And then the next day, a copy of Mansions of Madness would arrive and we'd be like, what is this? This is the most complicated game ever made. And it just kind of meant we ended up with some might say, eclectic collection. So it was nice then to actually like reconnect and be like, all right, what of these do we actually like enjoy sitting down and doing and getting out of it, and trying to almost entertain each other's individual tastes a bit more. Like obviously we've got like a lot of like crossover in the games we like to play, but I was doing a lot more of kind of, if there's something Emily wanted to play that I wasn't really too keen on, be like more willing to try it, I suppose. I know it sounds like I was like just being so obstinate before, but
no, not at all. I think there was a lot of people who I've seen a lot of people who are like, I felt I used to collect for collect's sake, as in I had a relatively reasonable size collection of board games that included a lot of names that everybody would have recognised. And I've seen a lot of people saying, right, I have now culled my collection down to games that I know I'm definitely going to play, because based on the current climate, there's no way I'm going to get this 5-player game to the table or this 4-player game to the table. It's never ever going to happen. So I might as well get rid of it and get something that I know is going to come to the table kind of again and again. Which I guess that's how things have gone. I think that there's been a little bit of introspection for people. I think people are looking for this golden day where the sun's going to come up and everybody's scheduled for their vaccines, and then people are going to say, well, look, we can get back together and play some board games. And I think some people's tastes are potentially going to change because they've been forced maybe into that situation where you're right about the house thing, because we, my partner, they're in another room doing their job. I'm in my room doing my job. There's this extra hour and a half that we have every day through commuting that we can get back. So it kind of, it changes how you kind of view things and how you spend your spare time. And if you can't go anywhere in your house, I mean, I don't think I've got anything left in the house to do. Do you know how you've always got these little jobs?
I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm always like, so I'm still somehow like at least 10 miles behind, the rest of the marathon runners. Like, but it's that thing of like, it's so easy, and I feel like there are lots of people who do this as well. But like, it's so easy to not think about how you're spending your time and just go on autopilot and do kind of like what you've always done, right? Because you just revert to habit, and then it's like, okay, well, I wake up in the morning and I can sleep in because I don't have a commute, and then I can do my work and I can have a bit more, be a bit more cheeky with breaks, and so it's like, get my bits done, and then like, and then I work maybe a little bit longer, or I like start on dinner earlier or whatever, and then I eat, and then I sit in front of the TV, and then I go to bed and I do the same thing again. And it happens so easily that you've done it for like a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then you're like, oh, what have I actually what have I done? It's this like slow sinking feeling, like, oh, I'm not actually doing anything. So then, like, whether it's like board games or like arts and crafts or anything, like, you get this kind of feeling of, all right, I'll make time for this. I got to like set it aside, and we're going to come together, and we're going to agree to do it. And it feels like it's structure, really. That's what anyone really wants, is it's kind of, like feeling like there's actually a plan. It's people don't even necessarily have like family Zoom calls or whatever because they've got something really important to discuss. It's just this feeling like, okay, now we have like family time, like
sense of
time to connect with friends. And I know, like, especially like people like my age group, it's so like we're kind of so into like, we've got such like rigid digital habits anyway, that once we were kind of shut in the house, it was like, oh, well, I've got more time to do like, doom scrolling and just like,
I know.
and you don't realize how many like opportunities to socialize you're kind of missing out on because you can't just like, and it's so hard to just pull people back in and get back into the habit of it and change the tune, as it were.
I think at the beginning, we got the garden done. We kind of started painting windows and decorating parts in the house, and all these little jobs that I've been meaning to do forever. I was like, you know what? Because I've got this extra time, I'm just going to get the jobs done. And I think we're at the point where we've done everything. We're at the point where it's kind of like, at the beginning it was like, well, you've got all this extra time at the weekend. We can't go out anywhere. We can't just go out to waste time. We're now going to be inside, so we might as well do stuff around the house. So we did that. But then we're now on the other side of it, where it's kind of like, at the beginning it was like, well, you can get this done now. It's kind of like, well, there's no point in kind of getting everything done, is there? We might as well leave ourselves a couple of little bits to do. Otherwise, we're kind of fourth rail bridging it. We're having to start and paint everything again, kind of from the kind of beginning, which is always kind of fun. What I have noticed is that we've ended up playing more kind of board games, but the more heavier stuff isn't getting as played as much. But the lighter filler stuff. I mean, my youngest, he's 8. So if there's I'm currently playing. We've been playing a lot of Zombie Kidz Evolution, which kind of came from nowhere and has become kind of like the industry darling, and kind of won a couple of awards. But we've been playing that, and the reason for that is really easy to play, easy to play. And you literally roll a dice, place a zombie, move your character, get rid of some zombies, keep going until the end. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's got like legacy aspects to it. So,
yeah, I was really intrigued by it. It's something that we're like kind of playing around more with, and like in developing games, kind of saying like there's this kind of assumption among some designers that like people who would describe themselves as casual gamers don't want an involved experience. So then I think there's people who were kind of like, I would guess surprised when these like kind of light legacy games came out, and it's like something you can keep coming back to, but it is inherently something that's like designed to be as easy to get to the table as possible, and to kind of be quick to play, and to be kind of like friction free, and because people still want to feel like they're doing something, or they're like telling a story, or they're kind of like like revisiting the same thing.
Yeah, and it's also it's not like kind of like say the other like pandemic stuff where you are you're changing the thing and you can't go back, you can't revert back to a previous thing. I think the best thing about this is that I can make changes to it, but it's all optional. So if I then decide to scale stuff back, and if there's somebody new that's going to learn how to play the game, we can scale everything back to the beginning, and we can go back to the basic rules, and then we can introduce the new rules, and it is like that. But it's really funny because what I see in the kind of the way things work just now is that I don't know of many people that experience maybe something more than 2 or 3 times. Unless it's like what you would call one of the mainstays, I don't see people kind of getting involved and sitting there and enjoying that and saying, well, this is my 8th, this is my 9th. The thing with the Zombie Kidz is we're on game number 15, 16. And there's no way that we're not gonna keep playing, because every single time you play, whether you win or lose, you get a sticker.
Yeah, it's like the little toy box aspect, and the fact that it kind of took it to happen in a kids game for everyone to realize, like, well, I should say quote unquote kids game, for that to do it, it made everyone kind of realize, like, oh, that's actually what I want. It's just like that, like, kind of toy box aspect where it's like it just gives you new things to play with, and everyone gets really caught up in this idea of like, oh, it's got to be, balanced and uber competitive. And I keep kind of saying to people, like, what's the point in this being like a really competitive game if it's not likely that I'm going to play it like 2 or 3 times, or with the same people over and over and over again? Because it's even again, it's like half as competitive, or like less balanced. Like if I play it like 15, 16 more times, I'm gonna I wouldn't be playing it again if I wasn't enjoying it. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of weird kind of sideways thinking in board games, and I think it is largely down to what we were saying earlier about like how people respond online and like who are the vocal parts of that audience.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be like people who are, writing on BGG like, this is balanced, or I found this dominant strategy. And it's like, if you played a game enough to find out that there's a dominant strategy, have you not gotten, your enjoyment out of it? Have you not,
But where at the same time you've got the fear of the huge amount of choice that you've got, and I think that sometimes is compounded by the kind of the media, because media at the moment in this kind of space is very much, this is the latest thing I have got. Have a look at the latest thing that I have got, and biggest respect to people like 3-minute board games or 1-minute board games. Is it Sarah Shah and Jared at 3-minute board games? But they're just basically, this is how to tell you how quickly whether or not you think you might like the game. There's no kind of critical angle taken on it at all. And it's kind of like very quick, fast foody, here's a service of, here's a service which shows you very quickly whether or not you're going to like that. And I've actually had people, designers and companies contact me and say, how easy is it to make, how easy would it be to make a quick video about the main points of the game? And it's like, do you want that kind of thing? Do you really want that? Because I know, I've watched kind of playthrough videos of like 2 hours and then an opinion, and Raddle's stuff was a kind of like, Raddle's was kind of like, here's my final thoughts, which were on a separate video, and now we seem to be down to this thing of let's try and keep videos under 10 minutes, which is really difficult to kind of do.
Yeah, I think it's that because the amount of releases have, vastly expanded.
Oh yeah,
it's like everyone is trying to almost keep up with it because I do love this about the board game kind of industry community at large, is that there's this feeling of like, on the table you want competition, but then in the actual industry, competition's a dirty word. You don't want to like be trying to outdo another publisher.
Yeah, no.
Or if you do, you want to be like seen to be lifting up the little guy at the same time and celebrating like smaller creators, and that's like something that's really wonderful. But it's also just exhausting, especially for if you come at this like if you did what I did, like you start and you say, okay, I've made a game and I think it's pretty good and my friends like it and I want to bring it to like a wider audience. Mm-hmm. There is just this like almost accepted fact now in the industry that like, oh yeah, what you're going to do is start up a board game company, and that's like, like we've stuck with it, but for every company that sticks with it and turns it into a thing, there are also people who get like really burnt out and really like, disappointed, or they like invest a lot of their own personal money into it and they like lose it, and it's like kind of and all the change in the media is like just trying to accommodate for this. It's like trying to celebrate everyone equally, and everyone needs to have their like 5 minutes in the spotlight. And this is not to say that like anyone's actually responsible for that, because if you like start up a company and you have a bad experience, it was just it was just you, But there is just this, like you say, like this kind of like trying to constantly slim everything down so that we can still meet the requirements and that everyone can talk about every game that comes out. And I can only imagine what it's like on behind the scenes to actually like play that many games. And I know that places like Shut Up and Sit Down, like they play like 10 times as many games as they actually end up, reviewing and turning into videos. And we've sent them games in the past, and they've played and be like, yeah, we've enjoyed, but it's not enough to like turn into, to give it the treatment. And we started thinking, okay, yeah, cool, because I don't want to like, I don't really want you to feel like you have to like force out some content about this game and just create something that is seen by hundreds of people, and it's just you being underwhelmed on camera, like
Exactly.
which is exactly what happens in some places, like even with like paid previews. We've done some videos in the past where we send them a game and then they create like this 20-minute video kind of talking without a huge amount of direction about the game, as if they kind of read the back of the box and then played it for half an hour and be like, and just they thought they had an idea of it. And it's like, I'd rather have like a couple creators who are kind of relative nobodies who are really passionate about it and kind of want to do the pitch, rather than try and get all these big name reviewers on board just to kind of tick every box.
Yeah. Coming from a board game designer publisher point of view, do you care about reviews? Do you care about opinions?
Oh yeah, massively.
I mean, as in when a reviewer, are there certain reviewers that are kind of like the death knell for a game? If somebody doesn't like a game, you're just like, for goodness sake, now we're in a lot of trouble.
Well, I mean, like, so the kind of the big bad reviews we've got were from Tom Vassell, and that was one where I don't even think I sought out sending the games to him to begin with. They like, but it was Farsight and Ragusa he played, and was not a fan of either. And it was kind of, it was still like majorly disappointing to like hear that, and then to have the kind of because you get like a different response, right? If it's like a bigger reviewer versus like a smaller one. Like if someone random like reviews your game and slates it, then you don't usually really get anyone responding. Whereas when Tom Vassell does it, like people just start messaging you directly and saying, "Oh, did you see what he said?" And it's kind of like, and it's kind of embarrassing in that sense. But then it was also just, I don't know, because I watched, like, it's different for everyone, right? Like, I watched those videos and I thought, oh, he kind of missed some really crucial points there, or like there were things we did that I thought solved those critiques, or at least responded to them, that he hasn't even touched upon. And then and there were, obviously in the minority, but a couple of people who responded to the videos being like, oh, he didn't mention this part of the game. But because most people are watching a review for like their first impressions,
yeah,
no one's going to know any better if someone of that stature doesn't mention something. So those quickly stopped mattering to me as much compared to other games where they like other reviewers that like said why they didn't like something and said, oh well, this was done, but ultimately for our group it wasn't enough, or whatever, or had like a kind of, could actually explain it in a way that ends up being more useful to you as a watcher anyway, because that's what you're trying to figure out, right? It's like, is this right for me? Not, is this the best or the worst game of the year?
Yeah, I kind of approach kind of reviewing it. It depends. If I'm reviewing a game and if I'm writing about it, I'm more confident about writing about something than I am about videoing about something. And what that means is that I'm quite happy to go in kind of, I enjoy writing, which means I hope it comes across that my writing, I'm quite proud of the way I write. I've always kind of enjoyed the way that I write. My video stuff, I don't think that anybody gives 3 flying whatevers about my opinion on a game. I think that if I give an opinion on a game, I think that people are going to go, oh, well, if they don't like it, then that's a kind of a good thing. I don't think I'm ever going to influence, at the moment, anybody buying or not buying a game based on a video that I watch. And because I've instilled that in myself, I try to go for a kind of a more enjoyable, kind of chatty type of angle. I'm never going to be, I don't think, I'm never ever, because there's some established, as you say, there's established people. And there are people that are doing really, really well, like Quackalope seem to have come from nowhere up to like 13,000 subs in the space of basically 18 months. And I say he's come from nowhere, but what I do know is the guy works his ass off constantly all the time. And you know, I have a lot of time for Jesse and what he's done and what he's achieved, and people are really kind of taking on his opinion. It's the same with guys in the podcast scene, like the Board Game Barrage guys are doing really, really well, and people listen to their opinion, and So Very Wrong about games, they listen to their opinion. I am absolutely enchanted by everything that Ben Maddox is doing on YouTube. He knows I think the world of him, but his opinion and everything that he does, he's taken for what I see reviewing games in a completely kind of different direction. Which I think
you make an interesting point about kind of like distinction between kind of like review and critique, and it's a really difficult it's a difficult thing to balance, right? Like, because you want to because it's a craft, and it's something that is, and it's an art form, and there are decisions that are made for different reasons. Like everything doesn't just get boiled down to like, is this a balanced game or not, or is this fun or not? And it's tricky to kind of balance that with the like kind of consumerist angle, which is like, I'm watching a review so I can figure out whether or not I want to buy this game, or whether I want, or I mean, I suppose I find the kind of the former more interesting, because a lot of the times I'm watching a review to figure out like, what are other people doing, because I don't have time to or time or money to buy and play every game that comes out, and I want to kind of figure out, you know, quickly, like, what's the deal of a lot of games and why do people enjoy playing them. And it's just a lot more like helpful, I think, for everyone to know like the whys of a review more than like the whats. You know, like I was watching the Shut Up and Sit Down review of Search for Planet X this morning, and one thing that at one point that he kept like hammering home was like, this is a puzzle game, and if you think that playing like, you know, a Sudoku for an hour with your friends is the worst idea possible, don't buy this game. And it's not that's the thing, it's not to say that like that's not a damning review, that's not him slaying it, it's just saying like, this is what it is, and there are some people who will hate that, and we're just letting you know. It's you know, even a publisher who wants to have, you know, their game reviewed everywhere, they don't want it to be misrepresented, because that's how you end up with disappointed people.
Yeah, and that's how you end up with things like Scythe, I think. You know. Well,
yeah, like that's the thing. Like it's
the ultimate kind of table rug pulled from under people's feet, and that's not to say it's a bad game. It's not a bad game, but it was probably
it's just people didn't realize what it was before it hit the table. You know, even I was kind of confused, kind of learning that for the first time and thinking like, is this a war game? Or it doesn't seem to be a huge amount of fighting, but I have these big robots, and like that's the thing. Like half of game of you know, the game design side of it is you're just battling with perception.
I know.
And the amount of games we're working on at the moment where it's like, it's not even a matter of, you know, balance at this point. It's figuring out what people's expectations are and trying to cater for those. And if it's so far away from what people expect it to be, do we need to change the theme? You know, that's how I think a lot of people like to use the term like, like a theme that was slapped on. And I would bet money that most of the time it's that they played the game and they were like, oh, if we put this if we keep its original theme,
Yeah.
this is probably going to upset people, or they're going to be disappointed when they play it and they realise it's not a medieval civ builder or whatever. Like, it's too light for that. So let's make it about bunnies or like.
No, I mean that was Pendulum for me.
Yeah.
I mean Pendulum. I mean I quite I didn't mean to be horrible. Well, it wasn't. I kind of looked at it and I went up, looked at the camera and I went, the theme is rubbish. And I stand by that. And it's not just this game is, it's like, I think it would have worked better with any other kind of theme at all. Anything much more, the fantasy stuff just was a kind of a total miss. Which was
and that was something we were watching kind of keenly to kind of see the response of was Pendulum, because we are working on a real-time game, and as soon as that came out, and everyone started grumbling under their breaths, and everyone kind of looked around at me, in Braincrack, and they were like, should we still do this? Should we still do a real-time game? Because people don't like it. And I'm like, it's not that people don't like real-time games, it's that people have an expectation of them, it's setting up kind of like real-time games versus what is Pendulum. Aside from that,
exactly.
And having something where you pitch it and you say like, oh yeah, you can play this way, or you can play it without sound timers. It gives everyone this big signal that like, oh, these maybe don't need to be here. whereas it's with what we're doing, it's like, this wouldn't be physically possible to play if there were no sound timers. This would be a very weird, just a very weird strategy game.
I'm moving from, I guess, kind of real time to real life with so many kind of meetups and conferences kind of moving on to the virtual space. How much of that was a kind of a serious impediment to the business growth this year?
I mean, like, honestly, it was a sigh of relief. Because we were kind of going into the year being like, all right, now we have a baby. How are we going to do UKG with, with or without him? Like, it was just, even before COVID kind of reared its head, it was like, oh God, how are we going to do this? Yeah, because the conventions are hard enough as it is. Especially like things like Essence Spiel, where we were just, it is in many ways, and this is me trying not to be melodramatic, but it's like a hostile environment for a lot of publishers, because you are going into like a different culture and you are having to meet like certain business requirements, and you have to like look after your staff in a foreign country and have deal with punters who are speaking 5 different languages and maybe make money. That's like the bottom of the list. Usually it's like, make money, ? Promote games, and to boot, like, you're trying to do that while every other publisher in the land is doing exactly the same thing, and it will ultimately become a case of who has the most money to throw at this. Who can be who can have and the same with UKG. It's like, who has the money this year to have a 20 square meter? I mean, 20 square meters even that big, a big stall at the front of Hall 1 where everyone walks in, and to have like 1 million people dressed as kangaroos throwing leaflets at you, and to try and do something that is vaguely competitive every year for all the major cons, it's just exhausting. Like it's like publishing an extra game. It's that much effort. At least for us. I'm talking only for myself.
It was really funny because it seemed that the ones that I was exposed to are the ones that I had kind of dealings with. It was almost like the smaller community-driven events seemed to have more kind of success than the really big ones, and the really big ones seemed to be completely. It was almost fractured into individual communities. So, for instance, if you had a really good community behind you, and you were able to advertise and say, okay, come along for our live event, or we're doing tabletop, we're doing tabletop simulator kind of specials that you can join and play. If you had that kind of sorted out, as long as you had a community behind you, you were fine. Because I heard word around the campfire that Spiel wasn't great. People haven't,
I kind of made up my mind a couple months in advance. That, I mean, we did, obviously we did some stuff for UKG just because that's such like an annual kind of touchstone for us.
Mm-hmm.
But we made up our minds. I mean, pretty much like after Spiel last year, before we even knew it was going to be cancelled, that we were like, okay, this isn't going to be as big a thing for us anymore, because it's, whether it's online or in person, the expectation is massive of everyone. Everyone says like, oh, Spiel is the biggest show in the year, so you've got to like do like a massive release, and have like a big stall and really get the punters round. And we'd kind of already seen it at that point. We were like, at our current size, that's not really possible. And we just need to kind of, from a business perspective, what we need to do is just support our distributors and kind of and talk to and communicate with our audience about things. And we can do both of those things a lot more effectively when everyone isn't trying to do it at the same time. And like you say, like the smaller kind of presences, where there isn't such like high traffic and high expectation, we just get along with more, even just on like a personal angle. Bez from Stuff by Bez did a little did like Bez Day.
Yeah, she did.
I think it was like 2 weeks back.
Yeah,
and we played like, I think I did like 2 or 3 demos of Dead and Breakfast, and we did a little stream, and we were there in the Discord like chatting to people, and it was so much more relaxed, and we actually got more quality time with everyone who turned up than we would even at like a convention where we really put the hours in. And it's just not trying to do everything en masse. Kind of just produces a better experience for everyone. And then for the things that are en masse, we can pick like a weekend that's good for us, and that people are more likely to actually, not have 1,000 things to look at, or some, mildly janky, portal that's been put together by by convention organizers. And like and this is not me trying to slate convention organizers, because like they have businesses to support, like they have employees, they've been absolutely turned out on their asses this year and been told like with 6 months notice, like, all right, you need to pivot and be a digital events and no one knows what that is. No one knows what yeah, that's the thing. What everyone was saying was like, oh, what do digital conventions actually look like? And they all had to come up. It was almost like something off Taskmaster. It was like we had to just come up with our own interpretations of what this looks like and do
You've got 5 minutes, 2 sheets of A4 to fully describe and pitch to us what you think a digital event should be. And it's been the same. I mean, it's been the same in the industry that I work in, is that there's like trade shows where you get all the digital kind of companies, all the digital marketing people, and then you also get all the kind of the consultants that provide help and support to kind of like marketplaces like Amazon and eBay and stuff like that. And they were like still trying to push to have these big events, and I don't think really any of them were hugely successful, because at the end of the day, a lot of these people were kind of like, the reason somebody goes to a trade show is because they like the face-to-face element. People have drawn out their list of who they're going to meet, and if you remove that face-to-face element, they just end up contacting the company direct. So what I have seen kind of come from this is I've seen people like Renegade Games, they're just running Twitch streams all the time now. That's all they do now. Every like once a week, what they do is they say, okay, are you interested in kind of providing coverage for a game? Come on our Twitch stream, and you can play a game with us, and then you can kind of write about your experience, or you can play it kind of that way. And that's been a kind of like an interesting way of things kind of going forward.
It makes it a lot easier for creators as well. It's like what we were talking about earlier, and saying that there's this kind of rush to produce content to catch up with what people are talking about. It's so much easier if you're not concentrating all that in 2 or 3 weekends of the year. And we did some great play-alongs with like Board Game Gumbo for UKG, just sat and played the game, and I was like, oh, this it can be this easy.
Yeah. But we'll need to see. I mean, there's talk of things changing and stuff like that, but I'm yet to kind of see. I'm not. I think that if there's another setback, I think that I can't see all these events kind of happening again. I think there'll be a fracture, and I don't really particularly see there being kind of big events unless people can kind of get back together again. I just can't see it. I think people miss other people's company, and a lot of these, for me, going to Aircon, the reason to go to Aircon was I was meeting kind of Ross and Dan Hughes, and met Rodney Smith for the first time and everything like that. And that's like a big thing, it's like the person-to-person contact, so we'll need to see kind of what happens. But
I think we're just we're kind of looking at it like we need to just keep focused on ourselves, which I know sounds really just insular, but it's
no,
we can't just chase the kind of hotness, and if sometimes that means being staying quiet and letting the publishers that do want to use that platform to talk about their games that, if that helps them, then that's really good. Yeah. It's just that we're trying to almost take our time with things and figure out how can we when do we want to put our games on the pedestal and show what they're good at, and not just rush out something that doesn't value people's time.
Exactly. So if people do want to have a look at your pedestal, Lewis.
I don't want to make this just an hour-long conversation about my pedestal, but yeah, go on.
Where can they find you? Where do you exist?
We are Braincrack Games.
Yeah.
On everything. So braincrackgames.com, Braincrack Games on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And we have all pages on our website talking about all our different games. And we have, I think if you scroll to the bottom, there's a little upcoming releases page where we have then the things that we are working on at the moment. And then we'll be putting out kind of more. We're going to start doing more and more announcements soon about Florence, which is our next game that will come to Kickstarter, which we're very excited about.
That sounds all fantastic. We'll make sure that obviously we flourish everybody with the information on Florence and the likes.
Oh yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, people will hear about it. We're going to try and market things this time. We're actually going to do outreach and actually try and tell people about the game before we launch it, because we had a terrible habit of just a week's notice be like, hey, have you heard about Venice? Why not? Well, it's here. It's launched.
Fantastic. It was good to catch up with you. It was good to have a chat. Obviously, keep an eye on. We've got some stuff. We're going to be we're going to be filming some stuff, I think, which will be fun in the next kind of month or two. But keep an eye on us. But again, I can only thank you for Geck for coming back on. It's been far too long. Thank you so much for listening to my chat with Lewis from Braincrack Games. Make sure you click on the show notes and check out some of the games that they are doing. If you'd like to find out more about what we're up to, then again, you can click the show notes below. I'd especially like it if you checked out our YouTube channel. We're producing content on a regular basis, and it'd be really nice to hear and see some of you there. But in the meantime, stay safe, roll sixes, make something awful, and until the potential next time, it's good to be back. Bye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.